It is almost 1:30. I'm running a little bit behind. I was talking to somebody. I had something I had to take care of, and I could have possibly popped in here about 105, 110. And I thought, well, I'll do 1:30. And so, hey, we've got 28 people in the room. That's not a bad start. I've started with less before. Got to say hi to Lou T1501 from Shed, Oregon, where the original Shed house still stands, but is occupied by somebody other than the family. But still, that's pretty cool whenever you see a building that old still standing. CyberDoc checking in, as is G Keyman 565, who's a sort of a neighbor of mine, lives in southeastern Michigan. San Juan from Atlanta, Rex Voucher checking in. Also Andrew Lee from Nome, Alaska, and 69 Coronet 500. Hail. and L. I'm so grateful for you, Steve. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mark Miller with the obligatory sup. And Andrew Lee points out, yeah, we're ready. You have the button. So is anything going on today? What's going on with you guys? I got a warning on my phone today. I kid you not. It says that there is a fire risk in southeastern Michigan covering like 15 counties because we've had such little rain. I've mentioned this recently in other live streams. We have not had any substantial rain in like 4 or 5 weeks. The ground is so dry that the grass crunches. We had a little bit of a sprinkle for about 5 minutes, like 3 days ago, but nothing. I mean, nothing. And so my weather app on my phone put up a red flag, and I'm like, what's this? And it goes, red flag alert. There's a risk of fire in your area. And I'm like, is there something burning? They're like, no, everything is flammable, however. So Georgiana Thornton checking from San Antonio. Hobie Jackson from Northeast Texas. John Brunkola. Hello, Steve from Cleveland, Ohio. Joshua Gibson, what the hell is going on here? So Mark Miller says 66F and a dew point of 31. I don't know what the dew point is here. It's 74 and windy. But like I said, it's just drier than you can imagine. Ronald Wojtilko checking in from Tupelo, Mississippi, like Tupelo, honey. DePaul 31, good afternoon, Stephen all. And Twisty Beard, hey, from the UK. Hey. Hey is what they say in Finland also. That's how they say hi, believe it or not. I don't know why. They just do. Charles Layton, hello, everyone. Art S. checking in from Central New Jersey. Duncan Campbell, hey, Steve, were you up to anything interesting? I went to a wedding yesterday where I didn't know anyone. It's a long story. But I struck up a great conversation with a musician. And it was just a young kid. Like, he looked like he could be in high school, but I know he's in his 20s. And he has a guitar and a microphone, and he sings. And I was just talking to him about his equipment, his microphones and stuff. And he has an iPad. And I go, what do you do with the iPad? And he goes, I look up songs. And I go, why is that? And he goes, I don't have them all memorized. And the guy's good enough to where if you ask him for a song, he'll look it up and play it. And it'll sound like he's rehearsed it 100 times. And I know that because they threw some stuff at him at the wedding yesterday, and he was doing it remarkably well. He was so good, I got his card. And I'm like, don't know if I need to hire a singer anytime soon. But this guy's good. Idris Taylor, hi all. Oh boy. I touched the mouse one time and it jumps. Sarah C, hello, Steve and everyone. Ann L says it's a little swampy in North Carolina right now. Yeah, that's what I heard. And like I said, I have the utmost sympathy for all the people who got hit by that hurricane. The Carolinas in particular, Georgia also. Yeah, some of the stuff I've seen, and I've seen pictures, for instance, of what happened to the Biltmore. And I've been to the Biltmore. I know the Biltmore got damaged by floods quite a while ago one time. And apparently it got hit kind of hard also. So I've got friends in the Carolinas. Hang in there, everybody. Brian Ekdahl, good morning, Steve. Brian and Lacey, Washington. Michelle Feek, really dry here in Northwest Kansas. It's the weirdest thing. Portions of Michigan get hit really hard, and I watch, and it goes over me, it goes under me, it goes over. It never hits where I am, seemingly. Christopher Jones says, you can have what we are getting this week. Yeah, that's the problem with weather, is often used weather that shows up at my place. But CyberDoc, breakfast with a friend at a local Richmond, Virginia diner. Huge Western omelet, home fries, and a short stack of pancakes with coffee. Actually, I did have breakfast with my dad and a few of my brothers yesterday because my father's birthday was recent. And we all went out to breakfast at one of his favorite places. And I ordered a gigantic breakfast. In real life, I don't usually eat large breakfasts. I just don't. When I go to a place, they're going to bring it out to me. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Bring me the super hungry man or whatever you got. And it's like 4 plates of food that's stacked this thick, and it should come with like not just a warning from the Surgeon General. It should come with the Surgeon General. Like the Surgeon General should deliver it to your table and say, okay, just to let you know, I'm going to watch you and monitor you while you eat this because you're probably not going to survive. Pat Z. Hello, Stephen Lehto Minions from Southern Texas. Kino, what's your take on the Tesla puffery case? I'm not following that. Is Tesla being sued for having perhaps overstated what their vehicles can do? Scott Argyle, good morning, Steve from the Oregon coast. Tom Rogers says there's no fire risk in Maryland. Yeah, so if it's not one thing, it's the other, right? Mike Torello, greetings, Steve, from not particularly dry central New Jersey. Is the race of gentlemen going on right now? I follow a couple guys on Facebook who have cars they build and they take to the race of gentlemen out there on the beaches back east. And I think it might be somewhere around in that area. Jim Blast Name. Hey, from Alaska. 2 people so far checking in from Alaska. I like that. Pima, hello from Tennessee. Lowface checking in from Ireland. There we go. I like to hear from the people who are far, far away. Of course, Australia checked in earlier, Duncan, but Alan Brown Sr., good morning from Scappoose. Great to have you with us this morning. Hello to everyone. Alex Gregory, what up, Spaceman? Spaceman. There's several songs called Spaceman. Some of them are pretty good, too. Another story altogether. STP World, one of the more recent times the GPS took us through Detroit at 3 a.m. That was not a fun trip. Dude, I got news for you. Detroit at noon on a weekday ain't a fun trip, okay? I'm joking, but I mean, for the most part, if you know where you're going down there, where to avoid, you're okay. But if you're following directions from a machine that's looking for the shortest route someplace and it runs you through the wrong neighborhood, yeah, it could get ugly. Manitoban misanthrope. Wind has been crazy here the past couple of days. L. Grant Nelson's reporting in from west of Portland, Oregon. Josh Jagminas, hello from Burnsville, Minnesota. Fellow Lehto-ites. Chris W. Dude, have you ever decided to make a tour of classic car museums in Indiana? Holler. Yeah, there's quite a few down there. There's that the one with all the Cords and the Auburns and the Duesenbergs. That's one I've driven by, have not been in there. So one of these days I'll have to do that. Aaron Freeman says, I tried to see if Hurricane Helene crashed into Hurricane Mills. Huh. Okay. Michael Johnson says, hello, Steve from Westland. Today's weather is perfect for cleaning out the garage and taking my Model T for a little drive. There you go. That sounds like fun. Chris W., have you seen the races in Indy this weekend? No, I've seen little bits and pieces crossing my Twitter feed. Haven't had much time to sit in front of a TV, though, sadly. In fact, I watched part of the Michigan game last night. It didn't go well. They looked good for a while, but you can't look good for a while and lose. That doesn't do you any good. So they've got some things to work out. But I've mentioned before, they're going to have things to work out because they lost pretty much half the team is gone, including the coaching staff. It takes a while to recover from that. Kino, regarding Tesla sued by investors, judge said that their self-driving claims were puffery and should have not been taken seriously. When you call it full self-driving, what does that mean? That means what you want it to mean. Okay, sure. Okay. Lydia Klotz, hello from Western Texas. Aaron Freeman, is Ireland farther than Alaska? Probably not, but it'd be harder to drive there. I was friends with a disc jockey at WABX back in the old days. I was an intern there back in 1980, 81. And really, really funny guy. And there was some stuff in the news about Nicaragua. And they go, it's so far away. And he goes, yeah, but you could drive there. I'm like, okay. Oh, boy. Mike Torello from Google. The 2024 Race of Gentlemen will be held on October 4th through 6th, would be today inclusive, at Maury's Piers and Beachfront Water Parks in Wildwood, New Jersey. So that's happening right now. So it does make sense that it's been crossing my feed in real time. Art S says, yes, indeed, today is the last of 3 days. The Race of Gentlemen on the beach in Wildwood. Andrew Lee coming to you via Starlink, even though the FCC doesn't think it's good enough for rural customers to qualify for subsidies. Oh, boy. Do you think that a new law to fine public servants who lie would work? 3 strikes and you're out. Truth or fine? TL Duncan. It's hard to say. Public servants, like if a politician lies, like if they're in office and they lie, would that be against the law? It's strange because unfortunately, quite often, if you're speaking, they say, well, that's a freedom of speech issue, but your freedom of speech does not extend so far that you can, like, for instance, say, slander somebody. But yeah, I haven't thought about that one that much. Old Paint 71, Lehtoites or Laytonians? How about Lehto Ganders? That's a very obscure joke. Toe T. Wooker, any time in Los Angeles and Orange counties are a bad time to be around. Clarence Bettis, hello, Steve, from Missouri. Yeah, Padres to South Georgia is still cleaning up from Helene. A lot of people are, and I don't mean to leave anybody out. And that's the scary part about natural disasters, whether they're hurricanes, earthquakes, or volcano eruptions, depending on what part of the world you're in, is that you can be living your life perfectly fine for years, and something comes along and upends at the point like where there's no longer a roof over your head, literally. And it's so hard to fathom that until it actually happens to you or someone you know. And so, I was out the other day with a chainsaw slicing up some trees on my own property. And to me, that's a hobby. It's something I do, just, run the chainsaw for fun. And right about now, there's guys running chainsaws because it's very, very serious where they're, and they got to get these trees off of houses, off of cars, out of roads, and so on. And so it's horrible to think about if that happened to you. So, Alan Martin, hello. Jay Klein, Cincinnati check-in, watching this instead of the Bengals game. How are the Bengals doing this year? They usually do pretty well, don't they? In obscurity, well, I would say hello from California, but apparently Gavin Newsom has outlawed it. Are you sure it's been outlawed or is it being taxed? Aaron Freeman says Hurricane Mills is in Tennessee. It's a town. Yeah, I think I gathered that. Sig 226, Loretta Lynn. Zach, isn't there Diego Rivera mural at the Detroit airport? I don't know about the airport. I know there's one at the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts, right in the lobby when you walk in, the main big foyer or the big room, big echoey room you walk into. There's also 2 airports in Detroit. There's Detroit City, which I don't think gets used much anymore, if at all, and Detroit Metro, which is nowhere near Detroit for some weird reason. Clelia Mineo, greetings from Tampa, USF area. We are on the 2nd floor of our condo, top floor, just a tropical storm. Yeah, Florida is often in the bullseye, whether it shifts or not. And also, Florida is quite a lengthy state with, of course, the panhandle. So sometimes it can hit one part and not the other. But I've got friends in Florida who tell me about, the hurricane warnings on TV happen about as often as we get snow warnings here in Michigan. So Jill of all trades checking in from White Lake, which is a town not far from me. John Nowak Jr. Hi from Corpus Christi, Texas. Andrew Lee says you can't drive from Michigan to Nome either. Is there no road that goes to Nome that goes to the outside world? You guys have to actually come in from other ways. I know you can get to Alaska by car. And are you telling me if you weren't aggressive enough, can't you just go off-roading it? So, Chris Harder, good morning from Compton, California, born and raised in Compton, straight out of Compton. A. Thompson, do you think you could argue a performance ECU replacement on a 1980s car based on changes in fuel chemistries? What do you mean argue a performance? What are you talking about? To do it legally? Or whether it voids the warranty, because a car that's that old doesn't have a warranty. Not really quite sure if I understand your question. Thunderplex, I really enjoy your posts. I'd like to see more results. You mean follow-up videos? I try to do them when they happen, but quite often a lot of stories fizzle out. Lawsuits get settled when we hear about it. So, William Page checking in from Odessa, Texas. Michael Lawless, how many brothers do you have? I've got 5 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 6. You can say it right now, all of us together now. Your poor mother. Everybody says, Your poor mother. Jay Klein, my cousin drove from Cincinnati to Honduras and back twice in a stolen vehicle. We bought it stolen but didn't know. What up? Tesla puffer case. It's something like boneless chicken, because you can say boneless. It's kind of like Tesla driving could be ruled a cooking style or a driving style. A driving style. It's a driving style. Yeah. Full self-driving, whatever that means. Jeff Jones, Superman or Batman. When I was a kid, I actually collected both comic books, Superman and Batman. Back when comic books, I think, were 15 cents a piece. And we knew what day of the month they came out on. We'd all run down to Perry Pharmacy next to the A&P store and buy them. And I sold my collection sometime in high school. Not for a lot of money, but it wasn't old enough to be worth a lot of money yet either. But I was of the two, I think I actually liked the Batman story better. But I mean, Superman is just silly. I mean, he's got X-ray vision that somehow can burn things. It's like, wait, I don't think they knew what X-rays did back then. And kryptonite, how much of that kryptonite actually made it to Earth? A planet explodes several solar systems away, and somehow kryptonite's just kicking around on Earth like it's topsoil or something. So. Crew Jones says, I remember drive from Moscow, Idaho to Valdez, Alaska in 3 days. We did it in late March, and I'll never complain about another highway. And the question is, did I just mispronounce all those names? Because Moscow is actually pronounced Moscow if it's Russia. But I suspect Americans probably call Idaho Moscow versus Moscow. And is it Valdez or Valdez? Because I know it looks like Valdez, but I think I've heard Valdez. And so again, I might be butchering all of those names, and I apologize. If I was doing a video and it's important, I'd look it up. You can now find on YouTube people who do nothing but pronounce words. Valdez. It's like, how long do you watch that video for? Tom T. Wooker, Western Arizona, check-in, sizzling and warm at 95F, 1040 in the morning, 95. I got 74 right now. I might get a couple more degrees, but I think we're actually peaked out for the day because it's early afternoon here. So, A. Thompson, how do I find the actual EPA cases against the diesel shops that replace and modify the emission systems? I suspect those are lawsuits filed in federal court, I believe. And so you go to the EPA website, you should find a section on recent actions of the Environmental Protection Agency. And it'll say, we recently took action against this diesel shop, read here. And there they'll show you the press release that they released to the public, and it says, we at the EPA recently cracked down on this, blah, 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 blah. We like to thank these people. And somewhere in there will be the name of the case. And then you look up the case name and just go federal court and put the case name in, you'll probably find the case that way. The question is, what do you mean by finding the case? Because if the legal action was filed in federal court, it means you'll see a lawsuit, a complaint, and then if they respond to it and answer, and then if it gets settled, the settlement probably wouldn't get filed to the court so much, although it could be if it's a consent decree, I guess. But that's how I do it. I go to the EPA website, look for recent action, press releases, look for the names of the cases, and look them up that way. SubGR77 says Spider-Man is better. And, I used to agree with that, but I'll tell you what. There's nothing like going off on a tangent that we had no idea was coming 15 minutes ago. Spider-Man was an interesting concept because, of course, there's the two different universes, right? There's a DC universe of Batman and Superman. And Spider-Man, of course, was Marvel with the other people over there. Spider-Man was a teenager. He's a teenage kid who had typical teenage problems. And so in many respects, Spider-Man was a really cool concept to have a superhero who was just everyman, an everyman kid with teenage problems and so on and so forth. What I don't like about Spider-Man is what they've done with him in the movies. Because in the movies, number one, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of the origin of Spider-Man. And how many times can you tell the same story? And then you realize, oh, wait, it's Hollywood. They can keep retelling it over and over and over again. And so I don't like the way they've handled it going forward and also jumping back and doing it again. And so they Hollywooded up that a little bit too much, that whole franchise. But I always was a big Spider-Man fan. One of my brothers collected Spider-Man comics while I was collecting my Batman and Superman. So Josh Jogminas, did anybody ever figure out how a Black Hawk helicopter could be camouflaged on a snowmobile trail? Someone told me that they occasionally do camouflage them by putting white things over them. And then I think they also occasionally do paint them white. But the photographs that showed, along with the story, if they were the same helicopter, it was dark. And the question then becomes, was it covered with anything? And we don't know. I do not know. Believe in yourself. Make chainsaws great again. I didn't know they were ever ungreat. My brothers and I joke about having chainsaw parties. Like if a tree falls down on our property, we call up our brothers and go, "Hey, tree fell on my property. Bring your chainsaws." And it's better than like announcing someplace has free beer, because my brothers will show up with nothing but fuel and chain oil and a bunch of chainsaws, including a bunch of old ones, like an old Home Light that weighs like 50 pounds. Not a banned account. Why can't the president just arrest longshoremen? Well, literally, the president doesn't have arrest powers, but he can designate others to do that. The question is, are the longshoremen breaking the law? And if they are breaking the law, then they can be arrested for that. It's an interesting parallel, I'll tell you right now, with when the air traffic controllers went on strike during the Reagan administration. Yes, I'm that old. And during the Reagan administration, the air traffic controllers unionized and went on strike. And the government said, look, you can unionize, but you can't go on strike because you guys are a national vital system. And when they said, well, too bad we're going on strike, Reagan just said, fine, you're all fired. You don't want to work? Boom, you fired. And they went to court, and the courts upheld the right of the government to fire its own employees who have gone on strike after being told it's a potential emergency they're going to create by doing that. But the longshoremen, I don't think, qualifies the same way, because the air traffic controllers were federal employees. I think the longshoremen are probably privately employed. So don't know about that. Betty Boop, dueling chainsaws, theme song. Yeah, you can't get much of a melody out of a chainsaw, but I've actually heard of people who've incorporated chainsaws into their music. And of course, you've always got the guys who are juggling chainsaws. And then people who own chainsaws walk by and ruin it by going, you understand the chain's not running when the guy's juggling the chainsaw, right? It's chainsaw's running, but the chain's not running, so it's not dangerous. It's awkward, but it's not dangerous. Unless he damages the chainsaw. Please, the chainsaw did not do anything to deserve that. Jerry C., hello, Steve. Stephanie Howe, Maine, same old, same old. James Chamelik, any news on when they're going to finish the bridge to Hawaii? Yeah, I believe that's also the part of the punchline to a joke about the genie who appears out of the bottle, right? And the guy goes, I get a wish. I want a bridge to Hawaii from California. The genie goes, come on, make it reasonable. He goes, fine. I want you to tell me what my wife is thinking at all times. And okay, how wide do you want that bridge again? You told a bunch of different ways, but anyway. Kino, do you do any talks around the country? If so, when will you be visiting Los Angeles? I don't have any plans to speak out of the state anytime soon. I did speak in California last year. I spoke at the Institute for Justice's retreat. And I do occasionally speak places when I'm invited to do so, if it's appropriate. I spoke at the Attorneys General Conference in Florida a few years ago also. So depends on how things go. Devin Bound, hi from the Pacific Northwest. In obscurity, Lehtonese. Would that be the language I speak? Or would that be... oh, boy. It jumped on me. I literally just clicked it. Fat Man Prepper says Steve Lehto live or Bob Ross live. Tough Sunday morning choice. Ram 50 V8 checking in from Harrison, Arkansas. Sig226 asks a question on all our minds: Husqvarna or Steel? Steel. I've got 2 Steel chainsaws, and I've got several Steel pieces of yard equipment, including a brush cutter, a line cutter. I'm missing something else. I know I've got 5. And then I've got 2 Steel chainsaws, one with a fairly long bar and a pretty big engine, and one with a smaller bar and a smaller engine. And the smaller ones mainly for dicing up like, tree branches that fall and stuff. They're just a little bit too big to break with your leg. But the bigger one will cut through big stuff and take down some pretty big trees. And I've had to take down some pretty big trees before. So the steel, I like the steels a lot. Funny how steel or Husqvarna. Husqvarna, is that Swedish or Norwegian? Don't know. But steel, of course, is German, and they are known to be very, very high quality chainsaws. I've got a dealer near my house that sells steel stuff. So whenever I have the hankering to go outside and make some noise and cut some stuff up, I either grab one for my own collection or I go buy something. Annette checking in from Saginaw, Michigan. Mein Kampf checking into my people. And, I'm sure you heard that noise right there, and I don't know what's going on, but I'll take a quick look. Nope, just just foliage blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is foliage blowing in the wind. Oh, Jack O'Neill, Spider-Man versus Batman, who breaks more laws? Jerry Seinfeld. Oh, I know I've seen people who've now mentioned it, but the number of laws that are broken on Seinfeld is hilarious because they're presented in such a goofy way. Most people don't stop to think about it. But if you walk up to an old woman on the street of New York and grab her rye bread from her and run away with it, that would be theft, if not robbery, for which you could go to jail. So another story altogether. Brian Yoder says dark gray helicopter in the dark woods. How is that not camouflage? Well, I believe it was on an open trail that was open enough to be used as an airport. So I suspect there's a big wide open area and it was covered in snow. And so even in the evening, covered in snow, there is enough white out there to where you think the dark gray helicopter would stand out against it. But the stories I read never quite completely explained that. John Croissant, Spider-Man, what about the Fantastic Four? Okay, now you're going beyond my pay grade. I did not follow the Fantastic Four all that much. I'm familiar with them, but I did not follow them all that much, so sorry. Stephanie Howe says the thing is when these superheroes were invented, they didn't know that much about, say, for instance, X-rays. But the whole world was afraid of radiation, so therefore, Spider-Man and the Hulk. Yeah, Spider-Man got his powers from being bitten by a radioactive spider, I believe, which makes complete sense. And the Hulk became the Hulk because he was exposed to, I believe, a nuclear test. And that's right. This is all happening at the time. Cutting edge of what we were afraid of, or what scared us the most, was the big question mark regarding nuclear energy and nuclear testing and the arms race and all that stuff. So Kino says, if I recall correctly, they re-release Spider-Man movies often because if they don't release one in a certain time frame, they might lose the rights to the films. But do they have to keep redoing the origin story, or couldn't they just keep doing another one further down the road? Vorpal Bite, Reagan was awesome. Well, I'll tell you one thing about Reagan is you certainly knew which side of these questions he would be on. Because I was around through both of his administrations, and the guy was just look, here's how I am and this is what I do, and vote for me, and he got elected in a landslide, and so that's what the mood of the country was at that time. Terrell Cockram says the paint on a Black Hawk is a non-reflective paint. Yeah, I'd assume so. I mean, it's not quite stealth, but I'm sure they've done whatever they can to make it so it's not as highly visible. They're not going to do it in like lemon lime green like a 1970s Superbird. John Thompson says, hey, from Minnesota, your EV with solar panels and diesel generator to combat range anxiety. Crew Jones says, Black & Decker. Timothy Doyle, hi, Steve, like your videos. Thank you for checking in, my friend. I appreciate that. Codemeister Beats says, trust me, flat black can be difficult to spot in a wilderness area, even with lights on. It certainly doesn't mean the snowmobile driver isn't somewhat culpable, but it's harder to spot than you think. No, I agree with that, but my biggest concern, and I mentioned this in the video, is if I'm outside walking along, or I'm on my bicycle riding along, or I'm in a car driving along, I can't just be driving and go, I hope there's nothing in front of me. And if you're driving at a speed where you can't stop the second something presents itself, then you're driving too fast. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was driving on I-94 out past Kalamazoo towards like Watervliet, and I got caught in a thunderstorm. And it was raining so hard, and my windshield wipers on full blast, going like I still couldn't see. And I pulled over to the side of the road and stopped because I literally had no visibility. I couldn't see the end of my hood. But a lot of people would go, well, the road's probably clear. Just keep driving. For all I know, there's a cow standing there. So a lot of people do get complacent when they're in areas that they know. And I gave the example of being on a mountain bike. I've ridden my mountain bike many, many times on trails I'm familiar with. I come flying around a corner, and there's somebody in the trail who had a breakdown, who didn't think, gee, I should get out of the trail before the next person comes flying by. And, I've always managed to stop at those and not injure myself or anyone else. But it's a reminder that, by the way, just because there was nothing there last week doesn't mean there's nothing there this week. So, Wade Pittenger, do you have a fireplace or wood-burning stove? No, I do not. I give all my wood to neighbors. I've got neighbors who do. In fact, I gave a neighbor of mine yesterday a gigantic mountain of wood, and it was black walnut. And I had a couple big black walnut trees that came down, and I got to play with my chainsaws. But when I was done, I had a pile of wood, and I called them up and said, hey, you want some free wood? Come on down. Bob Blah says, good afternoon, Steve. Since you starred in the movie The Grand View Pizza Oven, do you add that to your resume? Am I in the movie? Or I mentioned? I've not seen the movie. There's a documentary that came out about the pizza oven case out of Ohio. I've read some articles about it, but I've not seen it. I don't even think is it available to be seen? I thought they showed it at like a film festival or something. So, but if I am in it, I probably will. I won't add. I don't have a resume. But I'll be sure to tell people because I'm already in other documentaries, so why not? Sub GR77 says, I have an old chainsaw of my dad's. Is a pretty blue, almost like Pontiac engine blue. Yeah, but what brand is it? Curious about that. Mr. Froglegs, I'm sorry, MG Froglegs says, longshoreman is already over, thank goodness. Well, that's good. I heard people were panic buying toilet paper again, not because of the hurricane, but because of the longshoreman. So, Mad Max cars were the rocket belt sequences in the 70s kid TV show Arc 2 done with the real deal. I've not seen that, but I can tell you the rocket belt sequences done in Lost in Space were done with it, as were the scenes in Thunderball with James Bond were shot by actual guys wearing a Bell rocket belt. A lot of those things would cut back and forth. So on Gilligan's Island, where he's doing a thing that looks like a homemade rocket belt, he's got the radio around his neck. That's obviously not a rocket belt. I think they sliced in some footage, but you can always tell that it's real because the guys are always wearing helmets. James Bond was not happy. And it's very obvious they're wearing white jumpsuits. And the rocket belt had a flight time of 17 seconds. 17 seconds. 18 seconds, no, you're going to crash. 19, you're dead. 17 seconds, you better have your feet on the ground because that thing's heavy even when it's empty. So Beata Graf off Dalhagen says there's a comedy song about a chainsaw juggler. If it's comedy, does it involve him losing fingers or something or what? Oh. Well, Bill 57, bow saws, yes, chainsaws, no. I've seen guys who can play like an actual saw and get all kinds of funky, almost like a theremin sound out of it. So Duncan Campbell says air traffic controllers are also meant to still go to work when the federal government is shut down. Yeah, I mean, if air traffic controllers go on strike, it shuts down the entire air industry, which is commercial and civilian and just stuff being shipped around and people and all. I mean, people don't understand what that would do if they were allowed to go on strike and just, we want more money. We're all going to go on strike. MYOB, should we put our property in a trust to avoid lawsuit from contractors? That question involves like 4 different things. But one thing I can tell you is that, for example, in the state of Michigan, if you hire a contractor to come out and work on your home, and the contractor does work on your home, the contractor can get a lien against your property to make sure they get paid. And likewise, a supplier of materials can also lien your property to get paid. So let's suppose that you hired a contractor to come out and put a new roof on your house. The roofing company can lien the house, as can the shingle company if they supplied it to the contractor without getting paid. And they'll notify you of this. And so if you put the property in trust or whatever you do with it, the lien goes against the property. So the lien's not against you. It's not against your trust. It would be against of the property. And so, the question always becomes, some people might say, well, I don't care. I'm never going to sell my house. Well, if that's the case, you might be able to get away with it. But then again, they can also sue to foreclose on the lien, which you might not want that to happen. So, DePaul says black walnut is good for woodworking projects. Of course, something else I don't do. I have no wood burning stove, no fireplace, and I don't do woodworking. SIG226, thin crust or thick crust? Generally speaking, normal crust, which I think is a thick crust. But what's weird is pizzas, even regionally, are quite different. I've eaten pizzas in New York City, the New York City pizzas that are really, really thin and sloppy. I'm like, this is a pizza? But on the other hand, you can go to Chicago and get a pizza that's this thick, and they're good. But of course, like one piece will fill you up and put you into a coma. So it depends. There's a place in southeastern Michigan, at least there used to be, I'm not sure if it's still there, called Pizza Papalas, that made these gigantically thick pizzas that were so good. But it also depends on my mood. I occasionally will try something, yeah, it's not that bad. So Scott Summers, I almost had turkey dinner Friday. You mean you almost had a turkey get involved in your life in such a way that he would wind up on the dinner table? Gina Maria Italiano. Hello, everyone, praying all are safe. So, Wild Bill 57, I grew up with a fireplace. Haven't had one in 50 years. Wish I had one. Miss watching the flames. I can tell you right now that I had a fireplace back when I had Milo and Wolfie at one of my homes, and they didn't like the fireplace. They thought it was evil. I'd go to light the fire and it'd disappear. They're up at the far end of the house looking at me like, are you still doing that thing down there? And they didn't like it. Someone sent me a very, very nice drinking thing that I could be using right now, and I just didn't get to it in time. Next week, I'll no longer be drinking out of the cheap plastic. Tim Noah, whoa, I'm wearing the exact same shirt. This shirt, Eddie Bauer shirt, cool. I got a bunch of these. Oh, Padre, wouldn't the rockets burn your legs? From a rocket belt? No, the rocket belt's what they often call a jetpack, and it's got the exhaust that comes off the back, and then it goes down like this, and it points down and away from the wearer. But however, there were examples of people who were wearing them and screwed up on takeoff or harsh landing, and did get hit with the blast from the exhaust and got burned. I know one of the guys was a more modern user of a rocket belt who burned himself that way pretty badly. So the rocket belts were not toys. Very, very strange. Joshua Gibson, red oak stinks to high hell when sawn, like a sweet musty smell. I've got a brother who does do woodworking. In fact, the table my microphone is on right here, and also that bookshelf and that bookshelf are both made by my brother. And I know that some of that's cherry wood. Forgot what this desk is. It might be cherry also. But he actually goes and gets his own wood and does all that stuff. So he can probably tell you not only what it smells like, but what it sounds like from a distance. Oh, I can hear your desk. It sounds like oak. So Michigan Farm Boy says our old home light was that Pontiac blue color. It was back in the 70s, give or take. That's what I was wondering. So I seem to have a faint memory of my brother's home light, because a couple of my brothers have got them, and one's got an old home light. I seem to recall that it was bluish, but I could be completely wrong. So Peter Mandick says, yeah, they promised us flying cars too. They promised all kinds of stuff. Oh. Red Cat Blue Hat says, have a good day, Steve. I appreciate that. You too. James Carter, I've seen people play ripsaws. Yeah, Jeffrey Hernandez. Oh, that makes sense why my mom couldn't get her water panic buying. I mean, I remember back at the beginning of COVID, people were panic buying everything. And then a few weeks later, you'd see people trying to return like 10 cases of toilet paper. It's like, no, you should be forced to keep that. Just sort of hassle you put other people through. Rex Foucher says speed limits are based on reaction time, not road conditions. Heard that from the driving safety instructor. Well, I mean, it's all of the above, because your reaction time is based on the environmental situation as well as whether you're sober or not. So. Chris Harder, Steve, my local mechanic put the wrong catalytic converter in my Trailblazer. I go to Smog on Friday and they said it didn't pass, not compatible. Do I have a case? Yeah, assuming you relied on his expertise to do that, I would think that you can. But of course, depends on which state you're in. But if you were in Michigan, I would tell you to pursue that. But you would need to check with a local attorney. But of course, if you went to him and said, hey, I need a catalytic converter, what do you suggest? I'll pay you to do it. And he puts in the wrong one, well, then that would be a problem, I would think. So. Stagecraft Productions, it may sound like more work than it is, but I am earnest offering this. I wonder what your thoughts are. I apologize, but I never saw the first half of that. Sir Roadkill, am I missing like the first halves of statements or something? Is this what happens when I limit people to one comment per minute or something? I can't remove that, otherwise things go the other direction. Dan Busey, do you have any Turbine Car books available? Not at the moment, no. I'll get some more. The problem is when I get some more and I make the announcement, then I get 100 requests and I sit here and I've got to sign 100 books. Which, don't get me wrong, it's fun to do, but it takes a while. But I'll get some. Or shoot me a note. Send me a note at my email address. Say, hey, Steve, here's the book I'm looking for. Can you please let me know when you've got them in stock? And email me there, and I'll hook you up. Reiner Band says in the 60s, we had a home light riding mower that was light blue and white. DePaul says stopping distance depends on reaction time and road conditions. And of course, road conditions can change even from one part of the road to the next. And also, some people aren't that good at knowing how good those things work. Ronald Wojtilko says, I was told by the manager at Sam's that the lack of paper products like toilet paper was not because of longshoremen, but because they pulled it for disaster area support. And that makes complete sense also, because I can tell you that where I was, I saw absolutely no shortages at all. But other places, it very well could be that the distributor said, hey, they're going to need more of this stuff down there. So. LG is watching from historic Fort Gratiot. I recommend your channel to those I know. I appreciate that. Fort Gratiot, of course, is kind of like over here, the base area of the thumb. I think there's a lighthouse there, isn't there? I could be wrong. Stagecraft Productions, I wanted to know if you would like to be a program manager for a 24-hour law channel. Well, my channel already is a 24-hour law channel. I mean, like live 24 hours a day. If you have an interesting idea, just go ahead and email me at the email address directly above your statement there, and I will do my best to respond. but you kind of anticipated my response in that you anticipate my response by mentioning how much time I've got. Ed G, I have a question. When you respond to people, is it actually you answering, or do you have a response AI thing set up? Well, I'm just here. Are you talking about like emails or something, or what? Dr. Rick, good afternoon, Steve. Great to see you again. Great to see you, Dr. Rick. I appreciate that. Philip Crosby Jr., are your books on Audible? The only thing I've got on book format that you can listen to is American Murder Houses. And that was done by a professional voice actor. My publisher put that out. The Canadian Robot Lady is in the house. CRL. Hello from the windy Canadian prairies. Somebody else checked in and said it's quite windy up there as well. I'm not sure how close she was to you, but I get the impression that it's all pretty much windy there right now. So. Stagecraft, it is for a new cable-like digital platform. Okay, email me. Canadian Robot, he points out that she's been rather busy lately, and she's been checking in with me, letting me know, like, okay, I'm not sure about this week, maybe next week, that kind of thing. So, Gregory Rollins, with the way the storms are getting stronger here in South Carolina, maybe there's a time to get a deuce and a half in the driveway for future storms. Those things will drive through a lot, and they'll drive over a lot. It'd be very, very helpful in a place like that. Ed G already answered that question about 5 minutes ago. Charlton Zimmerman, do you ever watch the TV series Bolt? No, I don't. I've heard about it. It's legal in nature on some level, but I don't watch it. I'm not drawn to legal shows unless there's something compelling about them, or I see a few of them and go, hey, that's pretty good. Codemeister Beat says that the guy with the wrong catalytic converter could ask the mechanic to make it right. And that, of course, is always the first thing. Lawsuits should be your last choice. Litigation is never fun. You're rarely made whole. Even if you get everything you're entitled to, you still wasted a bunch of your time. And so if a mechanic is honest and upright, you say, look, you got the wrong catalytic converter on there, it failed. He should be able to take a look at it and go, oh, yeah, you're right. Or no, and in that case, he should be able to explain to you why it failed. And it's not his fault. I don't know. But that's something you could do. SIG 226, but can you drive it to Copper Harbor? You remember a deuce and a half? I did twice. Oh. G Keyman 565, windy here in the thumb too, according to the tree out the window. Hey, Canadian Robot Lady, the question I have for you is, where I am in Michigan, they've announced a threat of fire because of how dry it's been. Have you guys been getting enough moisture to keep it wet up there, or do you guys actually have a fire threat also? Georgiana Thornton says to the Canadian Robot Lady, now I don't think she'll mind me saying this, love the video endings. We call those outros or extros, depending on which side of the Canadian-U.S. border you're on. Dougie Doo, have there been any changes to NHTSA recall requirements in the last few years? It seems like there are many more recalls for things that wouldn't have been recalled in the past. I don't know if there's been any changes, or even there's a different number. Because remember that for it to be a recall, it's going to be a safety issue. The only question ever becomes, is something a safety issue? So believe it or not, I've had a Ford Explorer that was recalled because the roof rails, the things they put in the roof that you can like tie stuff down to, they said that if you parked it outside and water got down into the holes where the bolts went that held it in place, that or the screws, that those holes might get messed up by freezing water. And eventually those screws might come loose. And then as you're driving down the road, this thing could fly off and hurt somebody. And you go, okay, that's a real stretch. But okay. On the other hand, when Ford put out all those dual clutch transmission nightmare cars, they said, oh, they shift funny, but it's not a safety issue. And also we've had cars that stall, and they go, that's not a safety issue, just stalls. What about making a left-hand turn in a busy intersection? You know, so there's often a fight about that. So. Blah, blah, blah. Here in Cincinnati, it's been snowing leaves for 2 weeks. I think it's going to be an early and brown fall. Wait, you guys are losing your leaves already? I have very, very few leaves in the ground yet. Believe it or not, the walnut trees drop theirs early. And so when I'm mowing underneath them, it's crazy the dust they kick up because they turn brown and they dry, and then the mower goes over and creates a big cloud of dust. And of course, the walnuts go through the system, and you hear them ripping around underneath the deck of the tractor. So we'll see how that goes. Zach, does Canada have something equivalent to the Declaration of Independence? I can't imagine they do, because I don't think they ever declared their independence from over there. Alan LeBlanc, does anyone know? Sorry, don't know if you answered. Does the Fifth work against discovery? Yes. The Fifth Amendment protects you anytime you're compelled to testify, whether you're being compelled to testify against yourself. So if there's something they could not ask you on the stand, they cannot ask you during discovery. However, keep in mind that it's a little bit narrower, because discovery, generally speaking, what we're talking about is litigation, right? You're suing somebody. They can't refuse to answer your questions and go, that's Fifth Amendment going to incriminate me. It's like, this isn't a criminal case. You're being sued. But you can take the Fifth if, in fact, you're invoking it in a situation where you are likely to be prosecuted. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but theoretically, yes, but realistically, no. Shouting at clouds says GM refused to recall transmissions. Oh, they've all refused to recall all kinds of stuff. Canadian Robot Lady says, I'm not sure if there's been a total fire ban, but this time of year after the crops come off, with the winds kicking up, we can be susceptible to grass fires. It's been dry in South Saskatchewan. Okay, that makes complete sense. And the weird part is, you think, well, the fields are cleaned up and there's no more crops out there. What's the fire harm risk? Oh, because everything that got left behind is flammable. And, you know, one of the things that caused forest fires to be so devastating in the 1800s in America was they would clear cut whole counties, and they would leave behind all of the branches, because they'd chop the tree down and they'd trim the tree of all its branches, and they'd haul the log out. And they'd leave the branches and the leaves and everything else on the ground. It would sit there all summer long cooking, and then one day it would catch fire, and this boom. And you'd have a forest fire that goes all the way across the state of Michigan. It happened 3 times at least. So MHO, to remember the maples would turn in late August in Minnesota. Well, I've got 2 maple trees right out my window. I'm actually looking at 2 big maple trees. One's got a couple little sections of leaves that are starting to turn, but for the most part, they're fine. And that might have to do with how dry it's been. As to how colorful they become, and or don't become. I know that when they lose their leaves has a lot to do with the length of the day also, not just the weather. But the dryness might have something to do with that as well. Jeffrey Hernandez is freezing a hole to damage and full-blown stall. The 2 extremes of what isn't considered dangerous. Jerry Brown says Michael Jordan suing NASCAR. I got a bunch of emails about that. I've not done a story on it yet. I might, but there's a weird situation with NASCAR. Okay, NASCAR, of course, is the stock car racing league. It's been around since like 1949, and it was founded by Big Bill France, and it's still run by his family. And they own the circuit, NASCAR. They own it. And of course, they race on a bunch of different tracks. Some of the tracks are owned by NASCAR, but some of them are not. And so if you want to race in NASCAR, you race in NASCAR. Now, there used to be competitor groups like ARCA or USAC or whatever. My understanding is that the other competitors, I think they bought one up, and I think the other one just folded. And so right now, if you want to race in that level of stock car racing, you've got to race in NASCAR. Now, a lot of these tracks can host other races, and somebody could start a competing entity. And the question is, if you sign up and want to race in NASCAR, and they say, by the way, you can't race in any other competing thing, is it anti-competitive in the sense of like the Sherman Antitrust Act? And that's what the lawsuit is alleging, is that like you can't force us to race in your circuit, and so we can't race elsewhere, for instance. That's one thing they're complaining about. So we'll see how it goes, but I was not following it that much. In fact, I was not even aware of it until several people emailed me about it. So LG says Canada still has the queen on their money. Well, I suspect it's going to become the king pretty soon, isn't it? Don't they do that? Jack W., did you go to the M1 concourse this week? No, I did not. I drove past it yesterday. I saw a sign that goes Richard Petty in person here today, and I'm like, oh, because I had already agreed to do some other things. I've met Richard Petty before, really nice guy, and it would have been cool to see him also. So it's Trenton says NASCAR bought ARCA. They also own the sports car series. And is USAC still around, or USAC fold up? Reinhard Man says, I gave up on NASCAR. It's gotten weird. Yet NASCAR is having a real problem because when they started monkeying with stock cars in like 1971 or 72, all the cars started looking alike. Then all the cars started being run by professional teams, pouring tons of money into them. And it got away from being a race that the average person could just buy a car and enter and race, which is what stock cars started out as. And so now people watch it. This is boring. I don't care they're doing 200 miles an hour. It's boring. So trying to do things to spice things up, like have a playoff. A playoff. Why not sudden death overtime? Why not a shootout? I mean, what playoff? Like what? And I'm watching. I was watching NASCAR. I was flipping around a week or two ago, and I saw a race come up, and they had the scoring thing on the side where everybody's positions were, and they had to have two separate ones for where the race was and where the current standings were for the playoff. I'm like, what? They've lost the plot, as they say. Mark Miller, any new music you're listening to? Not really, not lately. Nothing new. When I find something new, I'll let you know. I got a couple big concerts coming up, though. Going to be down at ELO this upcoming week. Thanks for asking. A. Thompson, have you ever dealt with Clean Air Act violations? No, I've not. I deal with lemon law, which is defective automobiles. So, Mark Miller, playoffs? Oh, Daniel Crenshaw, left turn, and look, another left turn. Yeah, 4 turn left. Personally, I find rally car racing far more interesting. I do too. Those guys are crazy. Especially now you got cameras in the cars. And these guys are out racing on roads out in the woods where the cars go airborne, and there's people just standing alongside the road. That's cool. But something that the modern NASCAR I watch, and I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's cool they can tweak that much horsepower out of that small of an engine for that length of time, and the durability and the technology and the engineering is cool. But to me, it's not fun to watch. I'd rather watch Indy, and I watch the Indy 500, and that's it. So. Betty Boop, I remember a wonderful Steve Lehto fall drive video. Beautiful colors. Yeah, although I think I got up there about a week too early. I should try that again in the Cobra. Dynamic. Hey, Steve, you heard about Fidelity holding people's deposits for multiple weeks before they can access their money? People can't pay their bills. I have not heard about. You mean Fidelity, the investment company? I've not heard that. So, Blessed Life says, I got to see ELO on this over and out tour. What a privilege. I have now received emails from at least 4 different people who said, Steve, I saw ELO. My good friend Caleb up in the Northwest, he saw them very, very early on. Several other people have sent me notes. Somebody sent me a note from, I think, New Jersey. And everybody has universally said it is a fantastic show. Obviously, Jeff Lynne is the last standing member of ELO. So he's got a whole different support crew with him. I've seen footage people have shot of it. It's amazing. And of course, the main thing is the guy's voice, because he's the singer. And so if his voice is good and the music is good, it'll work. And I've heard wonderful things. I'm really looking forward to it. So that should be nice. Canadian Robot Lady, can't believe the ELO concert time is almost upon us. Have you been to any recent shows of Aussie Pink Floyd? No, I have not. The closest they played to me recently was down in Indiana. And it would have been about a 6-hour drive each way. And I toyed with the idea of going. Something else popped up, didn't do it. So but I will see them again. I love Aussie Pink Floyd, and my good friend Dave Fowler, who is one of the 2 guitar players, and he's also responsible for a lot of their social media, and he does a lot of their filming and editing of video and stuff. So Jay Klein points out it's Baltimore 14, Cincinnati 9, for those of you who care. DePaul says make sure the cameras are secured to the Cobra. Yeah, I had one go flying off last time, although I did find it, but it got some really cool footage of the image doing that. Cyberdocs is demolition, NASCAR, and figure-8 track format and car crash cams. Yeah, there's so much stuff that they could do that'd be fun to watch. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in, I think in England, they do like school bus racing or RV racing, you know, and it's fun to watch. It doesn't have to go 200 miles an hour to be fun to watch, you know. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the funny cars take like 0 to 250 in 3 seconds. That's impressive, okay? But Ed G, do you know how to get away from a NASCAR fan? Turn right. Oh, boy. Oh, 69 Cornet 500. Isle of Man TT motorcycle races are crazy. The Isle of Man races, I've watched documentaries about it. I've seen footage of it. It's insane. And it's the Isle of Man, which is one of these interesting little islands over there that is, I forgot what they consider themselves, because like they have their own government, but they are affiliated in some manner with England and Great Britain and all that. And they basically shut the roads down for these motorcycle races. And these guys are just ripping around this island on these insanely fast motorcycles. And it's astounding to watch. Of course, it's dangerous, but it's fun to watch. Oh. Joshua Gibson, have you seen the Prince guitar solo with Jeff Lynne and others doing While My Guitar Gently Weeps at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. That's a good one. Jay Klein says they do school bus races at county fairs all over rural America. I have been to a lot of the county fairs in my life. I've never seen school bus racing. I've seen figure-8 racing. I've seen demolition derbies, but I believe you. I just haven't seen it. But would that be a traveling thing where they take the same group of buses to each county fair? Because I mean, how many people have buses they can race at a county fair? Spooky, have you ever heard of the honor code in video games? It's where game companies patent mechanics and don't enforce them for art freedom. No, I'm not familiar with that. I'm not really big on video games. The video games I know the most about are the ones that you put quarters into in the old days, like Defender or Joust or Missile Command or Centipede. So don't know about that. Thank you. Oh, John Cross, how do we stop asset forfeiture? Civil asset forfeiture. Unfortunately, you got to take legislation. It's going to take legislation to do it. It's going to require a lot of people to harass their politicians and a groundswell of support, and eventually it'll happen. Hot idea says I saw ELO at Macomb Fieldhouse, Edinburgh State College, early 70s. Same venue as the Elsewhere and Frank Zappa live at the Roxy and Elsewhere. Interesting. Back in the early days. I didn't realize that ELO took like 28 years off from touring. I saw an interview with Jeff Lynne, and they said, so you took 28 years off? And he goes, yeah. I'm like, I realized I hadn't heard much about them, but he had put out a bunch of stuff. He kind of stepped back, and then he started producing stuff for other people, and he did Traveling Wilburys. And I didn't realize that he'd actually gone on hiatus from ELO as a touring group until he came back. So I'm feeling very honored that I get to see this show. So Carl's Corners to 60 Minutes has an article on the road race. Are we talking about the Isle of Man? I know I've seen a documentary. I think 60 Minutes, it may have been 60 Minutes, but I could be wrong. Jay Klein says, no, it's local guys buying retired buses. Do the buses get beat up? I guess they wouldn't if they're just racing them, right? They're not figure eighting them, are they? Figure eight bus races would be pretty cool. Jay Brown says Defender was the best, and indeed it was. I've not yet pulled the trigger, but I keep thinking to myself, I need to buy an upright Defender. I need to buy one. And I know that as soon as I get one, I'm going to be losing like several hours a day at it. But I'll worry about that when I get there, okay? PMOS says Flat Rock, Michigan did figure eight school buses. There you go. Boom. Cromwell 564. I remember playing Asteroids for over an hour on one ship. Yeah, Asteroids, the trick was that you would blow up all the rocks up until you get just one last rock, and you leave the rock letting it float by. And then you would sit there and zoom off the screen this way and come back on this way. And then it would go like this. And then when the 1,000-point ships came out, you just and you'd shoot at them, and they would never hit you. I saw guys who could do that for days. And after a while, that does get boring. But Missile Command was the one where I saw a guy. If you said, Steve, this guy's gonna be playing Missile Command today, you can watch. I'd go watch it. It was so much fun to watch. This guy knew exactly where to put the spread on every single batch of incoming missiles, and he could just play all day long. It was crazy. But Missile Command is a good one too. SubGR77 says, did you hear about the video game company Steam removed its forced arbitration clause from its user agreement? Yes, I did. And the question is, did they do it because they think that arbitration is wrong, or are they sick of all the arbitration claims being filed against them? I know that some companies have gotten buried and filed, arbitration filings. So I'd be curious about that. How about the races with drivers having to tow a trailer or a boat? And I assume to win, you got to cross the finish line with your trailer or boat, right? I would assume, right? Fitter, Happier, and More Productive says TT3D, Closer to the Edge is an excellent documentary about the Isle of Man race. It's also a great song by 30 Seconds to Mars. Jared Leto. Jay Klein says they do that too, figure eights. They race them, they demo derby them, they get everything out of them. Good. Vinny Northwest asks a question everyone always asks, isn't civil asset forfeiture unconstitutional? Most people would say yes. The U.S. Supreme Court says no. At least they've said no every time they've been asked that question. And it sounds ridiculous. Bill McMahon says, I thought you were talking about the Land Rover Defender. That's an automobile. I'm talking about the video game Defender put out by Williams in about 1982 or 83. MH08 loved the concept of a bonus city. There always had to be some way they could reward you to extend your life. And since the cities were the life in Missile Command, they'd give you a bonus city every so often. Likewise, in Defender, every 10,000 points, you got a bonus life. And people think that's silly. You get killed, you get another life. But they could have just extended the life on your ship and just said, we're going to let next time someone shoots you, it won't blow you up. But it's easier logic that way, I think. Canadian Robot Lady is discussing Canadian Thanksgiving with Bernadine Sackinger and others, and says pumpkin pie is more traditional in Canada, but indeed sweet potato pie is a delicacy. I've always thought pumpkin pie is just a whipped cream delivery device. That is pumpkin pie. Most ones I've had are kind of bland, and see it, the whipped cream that comes out of a can. Pumpkin pie, whipped cream. There you go. So, David Wyman says, for a while, your turbine car model was missing. What was the car that took its place? May have been a Tucker. I always forget which cars were up there. Right now, I've got the Turbine car, the Daytona, the Cobra, and the Viper. And I had a Tucker up there for a while. And I think I took the Tucker down when I put the Cobra up. So I've got one for each of the two cars I own. And then I wrote a book about the other two cars. So. Codemeister Beats, if you liked asteroids and music, try the game Beat Hazard. Pretty cool. Not heard of it. Bob Loblaw says to win the race, you must be the last car moving, bus or trailer. But see, it seems to me if you started the race with a trailer or a boat and you finished without it, it wouldn't be fair because otherwise you would just rig it to fall off the first time you got bumped. JP, love your show. Thank you, my friend. David Zaranansky says Humpy Wheeler used to have school buses jumping over cars at Charlotte as a feature of the Coke 600 weekend. There was a time when America had a fascination with things jumping over other things. Evel Knievel had a lot to do with that. But you had people jumping cars over stuff, buses over stuff, motorcycles over stuff, rocket-powered motorcycles, you name it. Wade Pittenger says the original Pong paddles intentionally did not go all the way to the top and bottom of the screen so you couldn't play forever. Yeah, and that's probably due to a lack of imagination on their part because if they wanted, they could have sped the game up, right? You just speed the game up a little tiny bit over time, and eventually it happens so fast that you can't stop it, I would think. But Ember Mist says Steam, I think, also lost a case when it came to forced arbitration. They just changed the terms of service to remove that section. Shouting at Clouds, I love Crown Vic Racing, where every race is exciting, and the cars are durable. John Laurie, game over, player one. Counterlink, never been here live before. Just wanted to say you have been a major part of my life for some time now. Love your content. Please keep it up. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. James Chamelik has an old TV show called Johnny Bow, where a young man who accidentally witnessed a mob hit ended up traveling around in a Winnebago. I think I'd take the mob retribution over having to live out of a Winnebago, but it could just be me. Oh, Padre says the trailers must finish. They are usually welded to the car. Oh, boy. Reinerman says there's a ministry of things jumping over other things. Like the ministry of silly walks. Padre says, sorry, chained. They were chained. Yeah, welded would have been difficult because the welds aren't flexible. Oh, my gosh. Scott Summers. Yeah, remember the monster trucks, of course, which I left out when I was talking about things jumping other things. Monster trucks often jump over other vehicles. Who would have thought that monster trucks would evolve the way they do or did? I mean, you know, monster trucks as feats of engineering now are amazing. And those guys can do things with those that are mind-blowing. So now they're discussing pawpaw pie. And I've never heard of pawpaw pie, but I've heard of pawpaw. And there's a town in Michigan called Pawpaw. And pawpaw is the name of a fruit that grows wild in places in the American Midwest, including in southwestern Michigan. Now, I've never encountered pawpaw in the wild, but apparently if you go into the swamps near like Berrien Springs, you can find it. And it occurs naturally, but the problem with it is it doesn't keep very long. So it's never been a popular fruit. As far as I know, it's never been like commercially harvested or anything, at least not at any big level. But apparently you can make a pie from it. Of course you can. So I'm guessing it'd be pawpaw pie. And I was talking to my good friend Karen Dion, who is the woman who wrote the book, The Marsh King's Daughter, that they based the movie, The Marsh King's Daughter, on. And in the movie, the girl has a pawpaw tree. And the funny part is that I think in the book, she has an apple tree. And for whatever reason, the screenwriter or the director or somebody changed it to a pawpaw tree. And don't know why they would do that. And I was joking about that with Karen. And she goes, I don't know either. She goes, but when they did that, I went and I bought a pawpaw tree, and I've got one now. So apparently she found some place that sold pawpaw trees. And she has a pawpaw tree now. So I don't know if it's borne any fruit yet, but we'll see. So James Chamelix says Space Invaders used to have a bug where the game would speed up the further you progress, but then it was said to become a feature. Well, the real question is whether or not it was done on purpose, because I know that Defender had a speed you could set, and at speeds 1 through 10, humans could play it. Above 10, it became very, very fast. And I knew a guy who ran an arcade, and he showed me. He goes, let's set the game to 1, and you could play it all day long and get trillions of points. And he goes, now let's set it to 100. And you would just get boom, boom, boom. And you're dead in like 25 seconds. And so the trick was at an arcade that had too much business, they'd speed the games up. And if they had more than enough business or they had some lacking, they could slow them down and bring in more people. So Ember Mist says, I know Rossman has talked about this before. However, the more media going to digital with the use of the word buy, even though it's more like rented, what possible restitution claims can one have? There is a huge, huge gap in the law because of the fact that in the old days, I could buy a record. I'd buy a record. I've got a 45 record. I bought the record, or 33, or a 78. And you got this record. You own this record. I can sell the record. I can destroy the record. I can take it to a Chicago baseball game and riot with that record. And I own the record. The record company cannot call me up and go, hey, we want our record back. No, it's mine. Store can't call me up and go, hey, we want a record. No, it's mine. I own this record. Likewise, if I lose it, I got to go buy another one. I can't say, well, I already bought it once. So when you buy a song that is digital from some supplier like iTunes or Amazon, and you buy the song, do you own the song the same way that you owned that record? And you think, well, yeah, if I bought it, yes, I bought it. So what happens when you buy a program, and now I'm sure you know that many of the programs, they tell you, you're not buying this, you are leasing this. And so a lot of times they do make the distinction that you're leasing something or you're licensing something. But when you license it, you don't own it outright. You have the right to use it under certain circumstances, under certain conditions, in certain manner. And so there's a distinction between buying, licensing, or how you use it. So that's the real question. And so we've heard stories before where they've sold something to somebody and then said, oh, we've changed our minds now. Here are the new rules for it. And it's like, wait, I bought it with those old rules. Why would the new rules apply to me when I'm buying it? So there's going to be a lot of litigation on this, I'm sure, in the future on a lot of these things. So Manitoban Misanthrope says, if buying is not owning, piracy is not stealing. That is correct. And so I've heard stories. I've never had trouble with the digital songs that I've bought. But I've heard stories about people who have had problems with digital stuff. And that's why I've always liked having a hard copy. I actually still have CDs. I probably have a couple hundred CDs. And every now and then I'll remember a song I want to hear. I'll break it out, stick it in my computer, rip it to my hard drive, and I can listen to it on my computer. But I own that CD, and I like that. So Paul from EP says you can play Frisbee with that record. It's Trenton says, I don't think there's a gap in the law. Companies are just false advertising, and judges can't wrap their head around it. Well, I'm saying there's a gap in the law in the sense of how it's being enforced and understood. And that's partly because judges either can't wrap their head around it or these cases aren't being heard yet. Because if I license a program to use and I'm using a program and they change the terms of service on me, am I going to file a lawsuit over that? I might, but the average person won't. And the question is, at what point does it become a situation where someone's going to actually go and do it? And it usually takes a class action or at least a very, very high-profile case to make it happen. Sub GR70 says pawpaw is like a small pear. A small pear. I've heard that before too. Cyberdoc says crab apples are only good for throwing at your neighbors. I've got what I believe to be crab apple trees. I've never actually done the thing where I can look at them and ask an app to identify it for me. But when I was growing up, we had a tree in our yard that had little apples. They were dark red or almost brownish, and they killed the grass. All I know is that we didn't rake them up right away. They killed the grass, and they weren't good for anything. And they would stink. And if you stepped on them, they'd squish, and then bees would come by. And I've got a couple of those on my property right now, but they're in corners where I really don't pay that much attention to them. But crab apples, I think some animals eat them. I think some animals, they're not a total waste of space, but they're pretty trees. In the spring, they've got really, really bright flowers. So I like them. Jason Howell, I love the insight about legal issues and cases. Thanks for doing the show. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. MH08, crab apples make great jelly. I've never tried that. I'd have to find out. Canadian Robot Lady says, big Toyota fan here, much to Steve Lehto's chagrin. Oh, boy. John Warren in Indianapolis, we had a pawpaw tree and a couple others in the neighborhood. My mother enjoyed pawpaws when mom and dad purchased a small farm in Owen County, Indiana. Mom planted a few pawpaw trees. That's cool. You know, when I was growing up, at the end of my street, there's a chestnut tree. This huge, huge chestnut tree. And I'm talking about that's how big the trunk was. And, you know, it had the flowers are really like complicated, ornate things. And then, of course, later in the year, they had the chestnuts, which were fun to look for and play with as a kid. And the tree's gone now. And I did not know until years and years later that chestnut trees are fairly rare now compared to what they used to be. Because chestnut trees used to cover a huge portion of the United States and North America. And a blight hit the chestnut trees and over a period of a couple of decades wiped out huge quantities of chestnut trees. So if you find them today, they're almost always orphans. Like there'll be one tree out in the middle of nowhere. And it just so happens that tree was so far away from the other chestnut trees that it never got blighted. And I've read articles about people who are trying to bring the trees back. And the problem, of course, is that when you have a tree here and a tree a mile that way, it's hard for them to get together and do what they got to do to create viable offspring. So that's our moment of botany for today. Mark Agamato 1313 Smith, greetings and salutations. Greetings and salutations. I believe that's a line that somebody said in Good Morning Vietnam. Cyberdoc says you can actually put the crab apples with a lot of brown sugar, maple syrup, lemon juice, and cinnamon and create a decent pie. Troy Belding says he can't watch the live stream because it keeps locking up. Keep up the fun videos. Well, I appreciate that. You know, I'm not having any technical problems today, surprisingly. Sometimes I do, but not lately. I think Sunday afternoons, the internet is calm enough to where I don't have problems. Caleb Taylor, does lemon law only apply to cars or can it apply to other types of vehicles? Depends on the state you are in. In Michigan, it's cars only, but cars can be passenger trucks or SUVs or vans, but vehicles used for personal, family, or household use. Some states have added motorcycles. Some states have added some types of RVs, although there's a big fight going on in California right now over that. And shockingly, in most states, boats are not covered. I only laugh because people spend so much money on boats and don't know that. And then I get a call and they, hey, about this $150,000 boat. And it leaks. It's the one thing it's not supposed to do. It's got one job, don't sink. And it's sinking. Well, the lemon law doesn't cover it. Mag Moss does, but the lemon law does not. So, oh boy, it jumped on me again. John Laurie, Lehto's Law is your internet source for pawpaw talk. Like I said, there's a town called Pawpaw. They probably have a radio station where they do pawpaw talk. DePaul says chestnut wood is also good for woodworking. That's one of the reasons that I'm familiar with this is I've talked to people and they talk about how much stuff is made with chestnut. back in the early days of America. But you don't hear about chestnut furniture or anything like that anymore because the trees are so uncommon, and the few that are out there, no one wants to cut them down because they're that unusual. So, Cyberdocs, let's talk about the crabapple fights as kids. In my neighborhood, we had an apple tree in our backyard, and it was just a scrub tree. I mean, we didn't spray it, so the apples didn't look good, and if you bit one, it tasted gross. You like the face? So, oh, we used to hit them with baseball bats, and so somebody would stand underneath the tree, somebody else go stand down the other side of the yard, and we'd throw the apples, and you'd hit them, and it would just, each apple would explode when you hit it, and it was more fun than raking them up. And one day, some kids who lived about 5 houses down and 1 block over from me were walking by, and somebody threw an apple at one of us. And it turned into a neighborhood apple fight. But it wasn't crab apples, it was apples, full-size apples. And so me and my enterprising friends grabbed a grocery bag and filled it full of apples. And we went and counterattacked. I can still tell you where the house is. I remember this vividly. Kids ran inside the house, and they were up in their upstairs bedroom throwing apples at us, and we were throwing apples back, and they were hitting the ceiling inside their house. I suspect they got in trouble when their parents came and said, "What happened in here?" Oh, boy. Root Squash asks, did you ever get an answer about body cam silence and spoliation of evidence? Yeah, and the question I asked during a video earlier this week was, if a police officer is talking on camera, a body camera, and he silences his mic, presumably to keep what he's saying off of the recording, and turns it back on again, if that evidence gets put into court, can you get an instruction from the court that what the officer did was spoliation or destruction of evidence in such a way that you can have the jury instructed that they must assume it was bad for the cop? And that's why he did that. And I said, I'm not sure about this because spoliation is usually the destruction of evidence, whereas muting the microphone, you're keeping it from being created. You're not destroying it. You're keeping it from being created. And it's a distinction that the law would probably recognize unless a court's ruled on it. And so I said, if anybody's familiar with a court case on that, please let me know. I had 2 or 3 people send me notes, including one who says, Steve, there's a concept called spoliation of evidence, which is what I said in the video. But I had a couple people say, well, there's statutes on it. And so some states have passed laws that specifically say, if the officer is recording and he mutes something, then that's wrong, therefore, and it flows from that. But I was wondering about a court case where a judge actually said, yes, that is the same concept as spoliation of evidence, because the key here is that you would get an instruction from the judge, and the court would tell the jury, by the way, that is presumed to be bad for the cop. That's why he did that. Because if you have a rule like that in place and cops know it, then they'll stop doing that. That's the point. At least that's the goal. So Janice Ellis, we threw horse chestnuts at each other with a spiked shell. Yeah, that's the thing about the chestnuts, is they fall from the tree, and there's a shell around the nuts themselves, and then they would pop open as they dried, and inside would be the chestnuts. But before they popped open, there are these like spines that stick off of them, and they actually would hurt you if you got hit in the face with one. Georgiana Thornton says, love your channel. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. G. Keyman says, nice face. Mrs. Teresa, 1999, says, 1999 Syracuse last school bus race home video on my channel. It was a fatal crash. They canceled them. Oh, wow. Yeah, you hear about stuff like that because you got to understand, school buses don't exactly have a ton of safety equipment on them, and they're not designed to be crashed into each other. And so if you're going to race them, you need to do stuff to make sure the drivers are protected, I would think. But David Peterson, pears make an incredible splatter under a lawnmower. Yes. I had a pear tree at a house about 25 years ago now. right on the property line between my house and my neighbor's house. And it dropped pears. And I'd rake up mine, my neighbor would rake up his, but we could never quite get them all off the ground. And it was right next to my garage. I'd walk out there and there'd be a buzz in the air you could hear and a cloud of bees just coming and going, coming. You think bees enjoy flowers? Take a juicy pear and crush it and watch what happens when the bees discover it. You will have more bees in your field of vision than you ever care to have. And it was insane. And I remember at the time going, oh my gosh, because the pear tree, it wasn't, again, these pears weren't exactly delicious or edible. It was just a pear tree, and it became a bit of a nuisance in the fall. So Donna Van Zandt, we had water fights inside our house, no carpet. It wasn't a major problem. Did your parents encourage that? Harry Selden says exfoliation sounds so much tamer than tampering. Well, it's spoliation, and of course, it throws people off because they think it's spoliation, but it's spoliation. Jeffrey Hernandez, wait, isn't that premeditated and a law about prior restraint about the muting of the microphone? I don't think so. At least that's a totally different concept. Terrell Cochran says mics on body cams should not be able to mute. I agree. I think that if they have to mute something out later, they could. So, for instance, I've seen police interactions at the roadside, and they go, hey, driver's license, registration. What's your name? And the person says their name. They go, what's your address? And they mute it. And presumably they did that when they made the video available. The cop didn't mute his thing right at that moment in time. So they can do it. It's just, Joshua Gibson says that video that Mrs. Teresa is turning us on to has 10 views. Shortly, it's going to have 11. Oh, boy. Aaron Freeman, did you ever mow a partridge under the pear tree? No. I'm not sure I've ever seen a partridge in the wild. I've seen some smaller birds, game-type birds in the woods in the Upper Peninsula. I'm not sure that partridges are what they are, though. Could be quail. Who knows? Now, I'm shifting from the water to the Gatorade. Jim Bouja or Jim Buha, don't know which that is. Is it just me or Steve's live chat reminiscing, turning into an episode of Gene Shepard? I take that as the highest of compliments. Some people won't know this, but Gene Shepard was a radio guy who was on late night over towards the New York area. He would go on the air at night and just talk and tell stories. And it was unclear if he's making them up or if they were real or they're half and half. It didn't matter. And if you don't know who I'm talking about yet, A Christmas Story. You'll put your eye out, kid. Gene Shepard is the one who wrote that story, and he's the voice narrating it in the movie. So if you've seen A Christmas Story and you enjoyed it, that is a Gene Shepard story. Now, obviously, they shot a movie to accompany his story, but the point is that Gene Shepard would just tell these stories, and they were fascinating, endlessly fascinating. And so I recently read a book, actually a little while ago, semi-recently, a book on the history of radio in America. And it had a whole chapter on Gene Shepard simply because the guy defied categorization. And I mean, later on, he'd appear on like David Letterman, for instance, and come out and tell stories. But the guy, or Garrison Keillor, very similar. But instead of 10 minutes of news from Lake Wobegon, Gene Shepard to tell a several hour-long story about something happened to him as a kid. And again, like I said, you don't know. It doesn't matter how true it was. Fascinating. So Jay Brown says the show also reminds me of Car Talk. Thank you. Although Car Talk was a little more car-oriented than I am. Harry Selden had asked about yesterday's Michigan game, but honestly, the less said, the better. Yeah, no, Michigan, they lost some important people, including J.J. McCarthy. They don't have a starting quarterback. And so they tried a new guy yesterday, partway into the game. They pulled Orgy and put in a guy named Tuttle. And he did really, really well for a little bit, and then he fumbled the ball and had an interception 2 drives in a row towards the end of the game, and that's when it fell apart So, if they win a few this year, I'll be happy. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs again. They did that 3 years in a row. I can give them a year off. So, Sig 226, and God we trust, all others pay cash. DePaul 31, Gene Shepard also has a cameo appearance in the movie. I recall that. What role did he play? I forgot. Byron Watkins, oh, fudge. But I didn't say fudge. Doing Hawaii. He's been watching for a while now, but this is the first time he's caught a live stream. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I apologize for not a he. I could have just said they, and I didn't quite get that right. I apologize. Cyberdoc, rest in peace. Click and clack. You know what's... This is one of those stories I feel funny about, but I'll tell it. When Car Talk was going away, a friend of mine called me up one day and goes, "Hey, Steve," he goes, "you do a podcast and you talk about cars, right?" I said, "Yeah, And my friend said, "Why don't you contact anybody you know?" Actually, he knew somebody who's involved in public radio, and ask them if they might want to take a look at you as somebody, either locally or elsewhere, to do a show about cars on the weekends. I mean, you'd enjoy that, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." And so I made some phone calls, sent some emails, and got nothing back. Zero, nothing. So they either didn't think it was a good idea or they just didn't care. But I don't get me wrong. I have enough stuff on my plate as it is. But I remember at the time going, really? Like, they didn't even bother to call me. So I appreciate that. Mark Miller, Tuttle, like the guy from MASH. Yes, exactly. Although I knew him best. And by the way, I did not know this until many, many years later. But the whole episode about Tuttle from MASH was borrowed from a Russian short story about a Russian soldier who didn't exist, and they just adapted it to the MASH universe. So the writers of that episode did not actually come up with that entire idea themselves. But what are you going to do? R. Herman says the Bengals are now putting a hurt on the Ravens. Georgiana Thornton says her husband loved click and clack. Carl's Corner says, "Wow, Steve went into overtime. Carl must not know that we launched a half hour late." It's weird. And Canadian Robot Lady can confirm this for me. I'm speaking to you right now. CRL, I'm talking to you. When you work in radio, you get so used to things being regimented. Like, it happens at the top of the hour, it runs to the bottom of the hour. It runs exactly 1 hour, whatever it is. And so the fact that I started my show at 1:30 means I'll take it to 3:30. Is there a reason for that? No. Is there a law that says I have to do 2 hours? No. Why am I doing 2 hours? Because I always have. Oh, boy. Oh, DePaul says that he was the man in line to see Santa in the department store, and he said to Ralphie, "The line is back there." Douglas Richter, the best defense for civil asset forfeiture is the Institute for Justice. Well, they're doing the best they can. They're like emergency room physicians, taking everything that comes in the door, but it's never going to stop until something else happens. So, Shattering Illusions 1, greetings from your tomorrow in Southeast Australia, Steve. Appreciate that. How are things turning out tomorrow? Harry Selden says you should have listed Jay Leno in your car show references. You mean in the radio, talking to the radio people? I explained to them my credentials. My credentials include several books written on cars, including a book called The Lemon Law Bible. We could have talked about legal issues in cars, but I make offers on this show all the time, and I tell people, for instance, I'd love to do a high school graduation. I'd love to do a commencement. I'd love to be the speaker at a commencement. And I've made the offer, and no one's ever said, "Hey, Steve, I'll take you up on that." Okay, whatever. But I've also mentioned I'd love to do another radio program. And I actually did do a guest disc jockey stint in New York State back in 2019. And I had a blast, an absolute blast. And I've said before that if somebody out there has access to a radio station, like a big old transmitter and a tower and a studio, I'm willing to come in and be a disc jockey or a talk show host. Take your pick. If you've got a format, I'll stick with it. But I could do a talk show, but it'd be local call-in talk, right? You got the local phone number. Or I could be a disc jockey and spin the records, figuratively speaking. I know they don't do that anymore. And have not gotten any offers on that, but I haven't been pushing that as hard as I probably should. So one of these days. Janice Ellery is in Fort Lauderdale. Has been lucky so far this hurricane season. Yeah, but I got friends who live in Florida, and every few years they get a near miss. A couple times they've been without power for some lengths of time. So you're playing a game of a roulette down there. Opinion, right? You forgot to do the station identification. Well, I don't have one here. That's the thing. Top of the hour. So Carl's Corners is 1:30. I thought you started at 12. Well, that's probably your time. I normally start these at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And I started today at 1:30 Eastern time. I was meeting with somebody and didn't wrap up quickly enough. So CyberDoc points out I could have started at 1:05, but I didn't want to appear in a hurry. I've actually been literally running around. I was in a hurry. I sat down, I started a video, and I was slightly out of breath, just a tiny little bit. If I took one big deep breath, it would have fixed itself, but I didn't. And I started getting emails from people going, oh, dude, you're having a heart attack. You got the COPD. You need to go to the doctor right now. And I know some of those are jokes, but so I hate to get too much material. So. G. Keyman says, going on 100 minutes. See, when you say it that way, it sounds like a long time. Jay Brown, you keep your FCC license current. The only one I ever had was the operator's license that allowed you to read transmitters, the actual, the meter readings. And I don't even know if they require those anymore. So I guess the answer is no. James Chamelik, would you ever think about being a judge at a county fair? Yes. That's the kind of thing I want to do. I want to be a judge at a county fair. I'd love that. Or a state fair. I would love that. And by the way, you're not required to pay me. If I show up to be a disc jockey or talk show host at your station or your friend's station, I'm not looking to get paid. I just want to do it because it sounds like it'd be fun to do again. I was a disc jockey starting in 1982 and was a disc jockey well into the 90s at one time or another. And I've got decades of radio experience. And I've also hosted talk shows in several different cities, several different formats, all hours, day and night. I can talk about anything, current events, or I can keep it law related, or we can talk cars, whatever. The greatest thing ever would be to go into some market where nobody knows me. And if I come on and go, hey, my name's Steve Lehto, I'm a guest disc jockey, I've got a YouTube channel. People go, what? Who's this guy? Chris Harder. They might be hiring DJs at the local strip club. Yeah, that's a little different. For one thing, they make you play the song shorter. Taco Cat. My daughter is homeschooled. Can you come give a graduation commencement speech at my house? I should. But she's required to put on a robe, the gown and the hat. And I get to drone on for like 20 minutes. Harry Selden, do you like Sirius XM, or is it like Amazon making things difficult for local stations? No, XM's not damaging local stations. I like Sirius XM. What's hurting local stations is the fact that there's 2 or 3 big conglomerates buying up all the radio stations across America. There used to be a limit on how many radio stations any entity could own, and it was called the 777 rule. You could only own 7 AM, 7 FM, and 7 TV stations across America. And you were never allowed to own more than one of each in any given market. So a corporation could own an AM, FM combo and a TV station in one market, but that was it. And they removed that rule a few years ago. And 2 or 3 big corporations bought up all the radio stations. And then, because they were so heavily leveraged to raise money to pay down their debt, they started doing cost cutting. The first thing is they get rid of disc jockeys, and then they get rid of competition, because what they would do is they'd buy up 5 radio stations in one market. and make them all programmed differently. So you got your country station, you got your top 40 station, you got your rock and roll station, you got your oldies station, and then you got your news talk station. And they're all in one building, and it's all automated or piped in from someplace else, and it's all syndicated, and it all sounds the same. And you're driving across America, and you're flipping on the radio dial, and the radio is horrible. That's why. There's very few independently owned stations that actually run their own programming and actually care about their communities. And I did the video on my second channel the other day about Craig Routson, the newsman who passed away, who was my newsman back when I worked in Bad Axe. And he'd been there for 47 years. And one of the reasons that was that station is family owned. And the family that owns it today owned it when I was there, all those years ago. And so they run that station right. They're not going to sit there and syndicate all this stuff in. They're not going to lay off disc jockeys to save money. They're going to service the community, take care of the locals, and the advertising will take care of itself. And so the thing that destroyed radio, terrestrial radio, was the big corporations buying up big chunks of these radio groups and homogenizing everything and cutting the cost. So Mark Agamato 1313 Smith says, I miss Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story. What's funny about Paul Harvey is he had such a long career in radio, and he managed to go out in such a way that he had this little, he had a longer thing. You could actually buy, I think, a whole half-hour newscast of Paul Harvey's, and it would run once a day, maybe more than that at one point or another. But it boiled down to where some stations simply bought the little plug he did at the end called The Rest of the Story, and they would sell that, meaning that somebody'd buy it, and a voice would come on and go, Paul Harvey's Rest of the Story is brought to you by, Higbee's Pharmacy in downtown Bad Axe. And then Paul Harvey would come out and he'd tell a little story. And it would usually be one where, you only know this part of the story, but in reality, he had professional writers do this. It was a really, really interesting and well-produced piece. And he'd always end by going, and now you know the rest of the story. Good day. And I heard a guy, it's actually on the Howard Stern show, but it was a disc jockey who was working at a station that carried Paul Harvey towards the end there. And he said that there'd be a pause between now you know the rest of the story and good day. And he said as a joke, him and his friends would pause the tape. So it'd be this big, long pause between now you know the rest of the story, good day. And the thing is, you knew it was coming. And he said, that one day he held it for like 30 seconds. And the problem is that dead air being run through the board out the transmitter. There's all kinds of compressors and limiters and things that gain boosters and stuff that are trying to take something and get it out. And he's talking about how everything's going haywire twice. He's holding this thing, and then he hears somebody running down the hallway, and then he picks his thumb up. Good day. So. Oh, Cyberdoc Steve at the 4-H fair would be cool. Yeah, I did live broadcasts from the Huron County Fairgrounds the 2 years that I was up there, and everything from the Huron County Bean Queen to the mud wrestling, which was a big controversy at the time. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Oh boy. Byron Watkins, if pro is the opposite of con, what is the opposite of progress? Paul Harvey. Did Paul 31 Higbee's was the name of the department store in A Christmas Story? Was it really? There's a place called Higbee's and a place called Dibbles, both in downtown Bad Axe. I think they're both gone now. And I always forget which was which. One was like a drugstore, and I forgot what the other one was. Long, long time ago. Joshua Gibson, those Renaissance Festival people are a bit strange. Robert Hodgins, we lost radio station CHML in Hamilton in the last month. They've been on the air since the beginning. So do they shut down or do they move the station? Because sometimes a station can be moved from one city of license to another. I was working at WKNX Saginaw in about 1985. And they changed licensed cities from Saginaw to Frankenmuth. And they started broadcasting from Frankenmuth, including an afternoon drive guy who played polkas, Marv Herzog. Scott Summers, if you're still around, I'm sure you know who Marv Herzog is. Oh, boy. Oh, and Canadian Robot Lady suddenly wants to know more about that station there in Hamilton. Of course she does. She's in Canada. Chris Harder, Good Morning Vietnam, Robin Williams. Yeah, there was a story, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before or not, but there was a story going around Hollywood for a while that there was a rumored sequel to Good Morning Vietnam that could have been made called Good Morning Chicago. What if Adrian Cronauer, after he got out of Vietnam, came back to America and then wound up on the radio in America? And that would have been very interesting if it was done properly, because obviously people who return from Vietnam often come back with some kinds of baggage. And so he wouldn't have necessarily just been a clowny morning guy. You know, if you wanted to make the show a little deeper, they could have. But as far as I know, it was one of those rumors where people are like, please, please be true. But it never happened. Of course, he's gone now. So George Allen says, Law Dog looking rough. Oh, MH08, I've judged a few green chili contests. If you think fire is a winner, you are wrong. I would not be interested in that, only because I'm not a fan of hot peppers and things. And so I'd probably hurt myself and probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between one or the other. G Keyman 565, mud wrestling. The mud always wins. So I can tell you that Bad Axe was a small town. And when I was on the radio there, we were a big participant in the Huron County Fair. And the Huron County Fair is run for the fairgrounds in Bad Axe. And they were announcing all the upcoming acts. And of course, we were going to broadcast live from out there. So I would get to drive out there at 6 o'clock and go find our little trailer. And they had this little trailer with windows on it and said, you know, LEW, Bad Axe, blah, blah, blah. And our engineer would set it up so it would send the signal back to the station. And they had a little mixing console with some turntables, you know. And they announced that they're going to have as entertainment out there mud wrestling. And suddenly a few of the local church groups became suddenly very interested in what exactly is this now that's going to be happening at the county fair. And somebody said, well, there's a promoter who goes to county fairs and he brings some young ladies with him. And they will set up a little area in front of the grandstand. And people who pay for admission can walk in and pay and sit there and watch these ladies wrestle in the mud. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's really going on here. And it ain't wrestling, but it is muddy. And I'm not kidding you. It caused a big stir because there were people who were saying, this is immoral. You cannot have mud wrestling at the fair. That would be wrong. And other people are going, well, wait, what are they wearing? They're wearing clothing, right? Well, they don't want to get all their actual clothing dirty, so they're probably wearing bathing suits. Young ladies in bathing suits, rolling around in mud in front of a bunch of drunken locals. And I remember the controversy. Because people were complaining, going, you can't do that. That's immoral. And other people are going, it's actually, I mean, it might be a little odd. I mean, I've heard of Jello wrestling and salad wrestling. I mean, huh? Mud wrestling? And they had it and they did it and it didn't end the world. But I remember that was one of the big controversies was that. And, you know, of course, a couple of days later, they crowned the Huron County Bean Queen, who had nothing to do with mud wrestling, and the world moved on. So, but I do remember that from a long, long time ago. DePaul 31, scantily clad young ladies. Yeah, I think they would probably have described it thus. Oh, boy. Oh. 69 Corner, if I've ever do a live turkey drop, as God is my witness. No, I've not. But I've got turkeys that live around my house. I see them all the time. Manitoba Misterdorf says, in mud wrestling, the true winner is the audience. And the real question is, did the guy promoting that bring his own mud, or did he use locally sourced mud? Because if you looked at what was on the fairgrounds at the Huron County Fair, I walked around out there and I was careful what I stepped in. So You had to hand it to those young ladies for being willing to roll around in that stuff for any amount of time. Surfing bird, mud wrestling, bikini girl sounds amazing. Steve Pappas, I'm not sure what the connection is, but Norwegian bachelor farmer. Of course, the Norwegian bachelor farmers were a group of neighbors of Garrison Keelers up at Lake Wobegon. They tended to keep to themselves, and I think they farmed, and I think they were Norwegian. They were bachelors. Fatty McButterpants, betting on mud wrestling is where I draw the line. Yeah, I would be surprised if that was actually considered like sporting. I would think that there's a chance that it might not be real. Now, obviously wrestling you see on TV on Saturday mornings, that's real. But the mud wrestling might not be. Piano Man, hey, it's that guy. Thanks for all your hard work. Keep doing good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Peter Mandick says there's a controversy about who makes the best green chili, the Pueblo chili from the western slope of Colorado or those hatch chilies out of New Mexico. Again, this is above my pay grade. I know nothing about chilies. I don't get into hot sauce. I get chips and salsa, and I get medium if I'm feeling racy. Harry Selden says the Church of Jackson probably doubled attendance because Scandal sells tickets. Well, it certainly raises attention and gives you free publicity. Wadley 99 Stripes had mud wrestling. That's right. That's right. I seem to recall that was it Bill Murray wound up in the ring wrestling. Doing Hawaii says we have wild turkeys living on the volcanoes. Are they natural? Are they native to the area? I've actually read some books on biology and discovered some fascinating things about Hawaii's ecosystems. And there's some interesting things, like, for instance, about ants. I don't believe there are ants in Hawaii. I'm talking about the insects. And so they have a huge variety of birds out there. But of course, a bird that doesn't fly that well would have had a hard time getting out there originally on its own. I'm curious about that. Boomer says, I believe it's more like a slimy clay, which is easier to clean off. That's what you hope it is. Oh my God. Aaron Freeman, did the Olympics ever do pole dancing? I'm surprised they haven't. They've done ballroom dancing and they've done break dancing, as we all know from the Australian dancer, who single-handedly assured that no one will ever take breakdancing seriously ever again in any context. And the funny part was I saw people trying to defend her and saying, oh, but you should see her competition where she won because she went to some regional competition and that's what qualified her for the Olympics. I went and watched them. I'm like, oh my God, she's horrible. She's horrible. I don't dance and I can dance better than her. And so what's sad is that she got herself into the Olympics, did her performance. She got straight zeros. I mean, think about this. You can go up on a diving board and stumble off the end of it, and they'll give you a point or two. She got zeros, goose eggs from the judges. They literally said you get no points. If you don't show up, you get a zero. So you coming out on stage did nothing but waste time. Okay? I read an interview where she's like, it's so sad that people are, making fun of me and it's not fair. And, I really did try. And it's like, you own a mirror, right? You could film yourself doing this stuff and see what it looks like, right? And if you're going to get yourself into public performance, understand that if public performance is going to be seen by people in the public, they're going to observe it, and yes, they will react to it. And so it's a lesson I had to learn. I put up videos. I put videos up on YouTube, and people watch them, and people react to them. And I've had some people go, hey, Steve, you look stupid. Hey, you look stupid. Guess what? 500,000 subscribers later, and somebody thinks I look stupid. Okay, that's part of life. DePaul31 puts it best, and I have to voice this to make it proper. 0.0. In Animal House, when the dean is telling those guys what screw-ups they are. He's reading off their grade point averages, and he gets the last guy, and he goes 0.0. Zach says, I bet Ray Gunn is going to be a popular Halloween costume this year. It could be. It could be. The funny part is that she could have tried to spin this into something, because she could have become the spokesperson for all kinds of goofy things. But in other words, I think she should have embraced it. She should have just said, hey, look, you know something? I qualified. I got there. It's kind of like, if you hear about some guy who gets into the Olympics and he comes from some country where they have zero participation in some sport, and he comes in last place, he can still say, I beat everyone who wasn't out there. I've been in the Olympics. Have you? Shut up. So, JR, never take breakdancing seriously. Again, I said in any context. So when you say, did anyone ever take it seriously? Obviously, they took it seriously enough to put it in the Olympics. Chris Harder says the dodo bird doesn't fly and they live on an island. No, correction. The dodo bird didn't fly and they lived on an island. The question is how it got there. And it could have evolved there. But that's the question, because there are some animals that are on Hawaii and no place else on one of the islands. On the other hand, there are some things that get brought there and they either thrive or they destroy something or whatever. So, Fatty McButterpants, you are awarded no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. Doing Hawaii, so we also have 10 different climate zones here on the Big Island. For your information, I'm on the Big Island, home of Kilauea. Zach says he doesn't think she has any friends because they let her go up doing that routine. Sig226 says, you don't think those people attending the mud wrestling were hoping for a wardrobe malfunction, were you? The question is if you could even tell at some point. Because I seem to recall, I don't think I saw it, because I think they did it while I was on the air. But I think I saw them walking by, and they looked like swamp creatures because they're covered from head to toe in mud. So, oh, boy. Dean Warwick. Is it Dean Warwick? Sounds close. Could be wrong. Dean Warmer, Jay Brown. There you go. Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life. Janice Ellery, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Yeah, but don't stand on stage and hand out stones unless you want to have stones thrown at you. Manitoban Misanthrope asks a question we were all thinking. If she was the winner, what were the other Australian breakdancers like? And Old Paint 71 asks a question, which I'm going to end on. Boomer, were the helicopter appearance camouflaged? There you go. And James Chimellick points out, remember the Jamaican bobsledders. And that's my whole point. If they got there and they participated, they still did something. If you go there and fall flat on your face and you participated, you can still say, I went there. She's upset because people are going, she did poorly, she did comically, she embarrassed the entire country of Australia. She did. She should own it. She should go, yes, I did. Guess what? You guys want to have a dance off right now? Let's do it. Come on. There's so many ways she could have addressed it in a more positive manner and spun it into something. She could have. But there you go. Anyways, that's going to wrap up me. We've been here for 2 hours. Like I said, for whatever reason, 2 hours and I'm out. Canadian Robot Lady, thank you for stopping by. Everybody else, thanks for stopping by. I will see you as always during the week on my normal channel. Steve's other channel, whatever I called it, I forgot, is at least Fridays, but sometimes sooner. And again, next weekend, Sunday, 1 o'clock, unless something else intervenes. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.